Val Santos. Una sa balita. Una sa balita. Musika o kalingawan. Mas tulong pinalakas. Radyo.
This is CNN Philippines.
This is enough, but this is what we can afford as of this time.
The vision of looking after the welfare of workers in our C-suite vision.
I think it's very important to have women decision makers.
Good evening, I'm Pio Ontiveros. Welcome to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. Tonight on the program, the country records the lowest number of Filipinos without jobs since April last year, but many workers are still not earning enough to make ends meet. The stage is set for the first presidential and vice presidential debates of the Commission on Elections. We'll tell you what to expect this weekend. And another beauty queen makes the Filipino proud. This time, Kathleen Paton brings home the Miss Echo International crown. Now, the number of jobless Filipinos is at its lowest since the COVID-19 pandemic began. Authorities say more Filipinos are getting employed as COVID-19 restrictions for businesses relax. But some workers' groups still staging protests now because of high fuel prices. Our correspondent Rex Remigio is in Philco and Quezon City to tell us more. Rex, what are their demands so far?
Next week, the government has earlier disapproved the suspension of fuel excise tax, saying it's too much for government coffers. Now, protesters are holding demonstrations in different parts of Quezon City and Manila, while for some workers, meanwhile, while they're grateful for having jobs after the pandemic, they're saying that having enough income is a different story.
Felicissimo Orsino is welding pieces of metal on a sidewalk along Commonwealth Avenue in Quezon City. He endures the scorching heat for 650 pesos a day for his wife and 3 kids.
Kahit pa paano, may pantustos na sa pamilya, okay na rin po kaysa sa wala.
His fellow worker Olan Gazingan is on contract for a certain period. He earns less at 400 pesos a day with a wife and a kid to feed. He says the amount is better than having none like what he went through at the height of the pandemic.
Siyempre po, para sa pamilya natin po yan, mahalaga po talaga yan para meron tayong pang-araw-araw na kakainin, ganyan, panggastos.
Fewer Filipinos were jobless in January compared to December. The numbers are improving as the economy reopens further. That's the lowest unemployment rate since the 17.4% in April 2020, when lockdowns forced companies to lay off workers. While employment numbers are better, the ranks of underemployed or those whose income is not enough went up. For Felicissimo and Olan, having work is one thing, having the means to get by is another. Although the expected hefty fuel price cut next week will be a relief for many, the workers hope they would somehow benefit from it. They say food and rice are getting less affordable with their small take-home pay. The government's 200 peso monthly cash aid could hardly make a difference.
Baliwala rin po kasi kada buwan, hindi na po araw-araw. Kailangan pa rin po kumayod para kahit pa paano may pantustos. At least meron tayong tatanggapin na anumang grasya.
The Social Welfare Department says it's awaiting guidelines on the cash aid distribution from the President's Office and Budget Department.
Titiyakin po natin na magiging maayos yung pagpapahatid ng tulong. Titiyakin din natin na yung iba't ibang programa ng DSWD ay patuloy din yung mai-implement ng maayos.
In the meantime, Felicissimo and Olan are hoping to land more secure jobs and give their family a decent life.
The week-long protests of different workers groups are set to end today. Are they successful on calling the attention of the government to respond to their demands? Well, for one, they admit that they're not yet successful because the government has yet to heed what they want, but at the same time, they're also saying that their clamor for better policies to respond to high consumer prices will not end tonight. Back to you.
Rex and Mito there reporting from Quezon City. Well, as Filipinos suffer from the impact of soaring fuel prices, a group says the 537 peso minimum wage in Metro Manila is no longer enough. And that's why they've been calling for a 750 peso minimum wage nationwide. Our George Cahilas has more.
How far can your 537 pesos go? In a market challenge, the group Bayan Muna prepared a menu for 3 meals for a family of 5. Rice, eggs and coffee for breakfast, rice and sauteed bagoong alamang for lunch, and rice and chicken adobo for dinner. The group also bought bananas for dessert. The total cost for the ingredients, 490 pesos. They still have 47 pesos left to buy coffee, vinegar and soy sauce in small sachets for the adobo. All these for 537 pesos. That's if you dedicate the entire daily salary for food.
Itaas sa 750 ang minimum wage. Itong 537 ay hindi nakakasapat. Pag binawasan pa po natin yan ng bayad sa bahay, kuryente, tubig, kulang na kulang po, mas lalo pong liliit ang 537 pesos natin.
For those earning below the minimum wage like Ayan Balangquit, making ends meet is quite difficult. Balangquit says the government's promised 200 peso monthly subsidy is not even enough to offset the rising prices of goods.
Yung pandesal nga magkano na? Before 1 peso lang yun eh. Pero ngayon 2 pesos na. Oh. Then magkano lang mabibili mo for 3 pieces of pandesal, 'di ba sa 6 pesos something? Anong nun? Mabubusog ba yung ano na? Pero kung yun ang ibibigay, tatanggapin pa rin, 'di ba? Kasi wala naman tayong magagawa eh.
CNN Philippines is still reaching out to the Agriculture Department on the impact of rising fuel prices on agricultural products. The Trade Department meanwhile inspected 3 supermarkets in Manila. So far, basic commodities are still within suggested retail prices. Some are even lower.
They have an average of 3 months inventory. If there is any movement at all of the factors that would affect the manufacture of goods, it should not be an instant increase in our prices. You remember po, yung ating SRP bulletin was only released last January 22.
The DTI says at least 10 manufacturers of canned meat and sardines and processed milk have applied for price increases. The agency will still need to study these requests. George Cahilas, CNN Philippines.
More calls for an increase in the minimum wage. The Labor Department says there are already 10 petitions and counting filed in 6 different regions.
6 na rehiyon po ang tumanggap na ng mga request for wage hike at meron pong magsisimula po, gugulong po ang proseso ukol dito sa susunod na linggo. Yung NCR po, by next week po, sila po ay magpo-conduct na po ng consultation.
While these petitions are up for discussion, Dole is still waiting for President Duterte's approval of the 24 billion peso wage subsidy, which is recommended to be sourced from his office's contingency funds. The department says the wage subsidy only covers formal sector workers and does not include freelancers. The agency explains small businesses are prioritized as they will be the hardest hit if an increase in the minimum wage gets approved. In world headlines, vaccine maker Moderna is asking the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to allow a second COVID-19 booster dose for individuals aged 18 and up. It says the need follows the emergence of the Omicron variant. Moderna has yet to submit an amendment for its existing emergency use authorization. Pfizer and BioNTech have also asked the US FDA to roll out a fourth dose for people over 65 years old. The firms are studying other possible shots like Omicron-specific vaccines. As countries ramp up vaccination efforts, a role model in COVID-19 response becomes a pandemic hotspot. South Korea breaks its record yet again for the highest number of new cases in a day. Over 600,000 infections were reported on Thursday, a day after the country logged more than 400,000 fresh cases for the first time since the pandemic began. Well, here at home, authorities are not worried about a possible resurgence in cases if the BA.2.2 Omicron subvariant enters the country. Infectious diseases expert Dr. Edsel Salvania says the Philippines may already have a hybrid immunity from the Omicron surge in January and the increase in vaccine coverage.
Kung meron na tayong tinatawag na hybrid immunity, that's when you have vaccination and then you get mild breakthrough infection, protective yan against BA.2.2. So even if makapasok yan dito, chances are hindi na yan magdudulot ng kasing laking spike dahil meron na tayong exposure dito. So the other things na nakakatulong sa atin, unang-una, marami tayong klase ng bakuna. Because we have different kinds of vaccines, particularly inactivated vaccines, mas resilient yung ating vaccines overall sa mga variants.
The Health Department also notes biosurveillance at ports of entry are maintained. Now, we're still tracking the situation in Ukraine. Russia continues its attacks on the city of Lviv as the war enters its 23rd day. Russian troops fired 6 missiles at the city close to the Polish border, but 2 were intercepted by air defense systems. In the capital, Kyiv, 1 person was killed, 4 others injured after a fire at a residential building. The blaze broke out after the remains of a downed rocket hit the 5-story building. 12 people were rescued, 98 others were evacuated. We have more stories when we return. Another set of debates between presidential and vice presidential hopefuls are happening this weekend. We'll tell you what to expect next. And finance officials want the Bureau of Internal Revenue to collect the unpaid estate taxes of the Marcos family. Stay tuned to Newsnight. Welcome back to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. I'm Pia Ontiveros. The stage is all set for the Commission on Elections' first presidential and vice presidential debates this weekend. Melissa Lopez gives us a glimpse of what to expect.
Presidential and vice presidential hopefuls returned to the Sofitel Harbor Garden tent to take part in a series of official COMELEC debates for the upcoming elections. It was the venue when they filed their certificates of candidacies 5 months ago. This weekend, it will be a place to show Filipinos who is deserving of their vote. 9 of 10 presidential bets will face off on Saturday, March 19th. Bongbong Marcos will skip the debate again. Meanwhile, 7 of 9 vice presidential candidates will stand on one stage for the Sunday debate hosted by COMELEC and its private partner, Vote Pilipinas. Buhay Party List Representative Lito Atienza and Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte will not attend. The leftmost portion of the tent has been converted into a stage. Non-participating candidates will be represented by empty podiums. Along with a ban from airing free content on COMELEC's e-rally Facebook page until the end of the campaign period. For 2 hours, candidates are expected to respond to questions beginning 7 in the evening. Titled Pilipinas Debates 2022, The Turning Point, the event will have candidates talk about their plans to rise from the pandemic and revive the economy.
Ang publiko, inaayahan natin manood ng debate. No? Sana makita nila, magkaroon sila ng preview doon sa dadalhing resulta ng ating mga kandidato. And we think that it will be very relevant for them, lalo't ngayon yung panahon na magdidesisyon sila tungkol sa sino ang iboboto nila.
All bets will deliver opening and closing statements. During the debate proper, they will have 90 seconds to respond, plus 30 seconds to clarify a point. In keeping with pandemic protocols, COMELEC will not let the public watch on site. Candidates may bring up to 10 family and staff members with them who will occupy these seats, while up to 5 members per media outlet, including technical staff, are allowed inside the venue. Everyone must wear masks and present either proof of vaccination or a negative RT-PCR test upon entry. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
Our senior correspondent and anchor Ruth Cabal will moderate the vice presidential debate on Sunday. All the debates will air on TV stations, including CNN Philippines, and on our Facebook page. For one presidential candidate, the public cannot expect accountability from those who skip debates. Anjo Alimario has that and other updates on the aspirants 52 days before the Filipino votes.
Senator Manny Pacquiao has cautioned the public that it cannot expect accountability from candidates who are not participating in pre-election debates. He said if these aspirants are elected, they will feel more entitled to do things without concern for public consultation. He also insisted that the public has the right to know the platforms and characters of all candidates. Former Senator Bongbong Marcos seeks to increase the salary of teachers by upgrading their salary grade level from 11 to 15. He noted that this is necessary as a way to further thank them for molding the students to be better citizens of the country. He also pushed for the teachers' retraining and refresher courses. Former education officials are expressing their support for the candidacy of Vice President Leni Robredo and her running mate Senator Kiko Pangilinan. In a statement, they said the tandem's deep understanding of the challenges of the education sector will bring about the needed reforms. Robredo was in Zamboanga City Thursday evening, where she pushed for the full implementation of the Mandanas ruling to help empower local governments. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno said he is offended by candidates who are campaigning inside churches. He said it is distasteful and unethical to conduct political rallies in the house of God. He also insisted on doing a campaign that directly goes to the people instead of gathering them to show up in sorties. Senator Panfilo Lacson said he is unfazed by his poor performance in the surveys as he acknowledges his friends for their contributions in his campaign. He said that these contributions prove his supporters' belief in his fight for good governance. He also stressed that the real survey will be done on May 9. Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines.
The Finance Department is pushing the Bureau of Internal Revenue to collect the unpaid estate taxes of the Marcos family to generate more revenue amid the oil crisis. The BIR wrote to the Marcoses to pay the estate taxes worth 203 billion pesos.
In general, we have been pushing the BIR and the Bureau of Customs to collect revenue and to look for sources of revenue because, as you know, we really need more funds given the situation. As for how they have been approaching the heirs, we are not quite privy because it's the BIR handling it.
Presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos earlier said there is plenty of misinformation on his family's unpaid estate taxes. That's despite a 1997 Supreme Court ruling that they must settle their liabilities, which amounted to 23 billion pesos at the time. As for presidential candidate Leody de Guzman and his running mate Wallen Bello, the 200 peso subsidy for the poorest households is not enough to keep the economy afloat and amid soaring oil prices. The tandem insists the government should suspend fuel taxes.
Yung bibigyan na 200, prop lang yan eh. Tulad ng mga nakaraan. Kunyari nagbigay pero malaking bahagi ng mga tao ay hindi naman nakatanggap.
Kasi ang hirap talaga ipatupad yan. It favors just certain groups. It's prone to corruption.
De Guzman and Bello support calls to ban private cars on the road once or twice a week. A business tycoon believes the next administration should focus on economic recovery. San Miguel President and CEO Ramon Ang did not name names, but he says he's looking forward to a post-pandemic recovery. Ang adds that the Philippines has been resilient and that it will grow faster than its neighboring countries.
I think the economy will grow very quickly. Especially kung yung bagong gobyerno marunong mag-focus on economic recovery program. Kamukha ng how to grow GDP and how to create more employment. I don't want to talk about any candidate. Basta I will support whoever become president, just like before, remember? We should tell our politicians to concentrate in helping the people. Concentrate in running the government on a good governance basis and also concentrate in generating more jobs.
Ang also says the government should build more export processing zones, empower the local manufacturing sector, and develop agriculture. More stories ahead. Another pageant crowned for the Philippines with a Miss Eco International win. Plus, candidates for Miss Universe Philippines take on the swimsuit challenge. Keep it here on CNN Philippines. Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Efforts underway to protect the La Mesa watershed in Quezon City through reforestation and ensure the sustainability of the Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System, or MWSS. A Million Trees Nursery and Eco Learning Center targets growing 500,000 trees. It'll also serve as a learning hub for environmental protection. The Million Tree Foundation, or MTFI, has planted 5.2 million trees in 5 years, and it plans to produce 10 million more until 2030.
It's a miracle in itself how we transform this place in 4 or 5 months.
Hindi lang sapat yung pagtatanim, kailangan din matuto tayo mag-alaga. At isa rin yun sa mga natutunan namin in this exercise, in this period. Prior to the Million Tree Challenge, I think we were more focused on planting the trees. Pero hindi yun, importante rin na mabuhay yung mga itinanim natin. So nag-invest din ho kami sa pag-alaga dun sa mga naitanim.
In San Miguel Corporation President and Chief Executive Officer Ramon Ang, one of the partners of MTFI, attended the inauguration and opening of facilities. In entertainment, the Philippines proves why it's considered a pageant powerhouse with our very own Kathleen Paton crowned Miss Eco International. This is the country's second title from the event. When asked in the Q&A portion if beauty queens should remain neutral on social issues, Kathleen said they must use their voices to get others to stand up for what is right. Candidates from Belgium, USA, Spain, and Malaysia were the runners-up for Miss Eco International. On to another pageant stage. The Miss Universe Philippines pre-pageant competitions are heating up. Here's a look at the 2022 Swimsuit Challenge video entries featuring 49 candidates vying for the crown. Photos of the challenge were also posted online. You can vote for the winner through the Miss Universe Philippines app until Sunday, 12 p.m. The pageant is scheduled for April 30 at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay City. And that is it for tonight. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Did you know that the virus that causes chickenpox stays in our bodies even after recovery? The virus lies dormant for many years, and for most, it reactivates in adulthood and can cause what we call shingles or herpes zoster. Although shingles and chickenpox are caused by the same virus, they're not the same illness. They may both start as a rash, but shingles can turn into painful blisters. And since it's a viral infection, antibiotics is not the treatment for this, but there are remedies to provide relief for its symptoms. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and our goal here on the program is to help you better understand the care you need and deserve. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Most people who develop shingles have only one episode during their lifetime, but you can get shingles more than once. Joining us is Dr. Candice Brillantes Corpus. She's a pediatric nephrologist from Asian Hospital and Medical Center, as well as the Makati Medical Center. Also with us is Dr. Cecilia Rojas Rosete, who is a dermatologist from the Medical City Hospital and the Rizal Medical Center. Shingles and chickenpox are caused by the same virus, but if you've never had chickenpox, you won't really necessarily get shingles from someone who has it. Instead, you'll get chickenpox, which is a highly contagious disease that can cause an itchy, blister-like rash. Now, the rash first appears on the chest, the back, the face, and eventually the entire body. Now, I'll start the discussion with Dr. Candice, our pediatrician here, because let's establish first how this virus starts off. So let's start first with chickenpox. Paano ba nagsispread ang chickenpox?
Very contagious in chickenpox, no? So with a attack rate of more than 90%, meaning if you are in the same household, most likely you will be infected if you are not protected. So they are transmitted through aerosolized droplets from the nasopharyngeal secretions, and also direct contact, meaning if you touch a person with the vesicles, you can get infected.
Dr. Candice, another common thing that parents who are aware of chickenpox is that they feel that this virus is something that they should get over with. If this highly contagious disease is present in, let's say, classmates or relative, may pinsan na may chickenpox, yung ibang parents, they think na ipapahawa na rin ang kanilang anak para matapos na. Is this safe to do? What's your recommendation?
No, since we don't know what will be the complication or if ever they will experience any complications from having the virus. So the best way still to protect your child is to do vaccination. So we still recommend vaccination. But if you are exposed, we usually recommend to have them vaccinated within 3 to 5 days after exposure.
Dr. Candice, since pinag-usapan natin ang mga vaccines, gaano ka-safe ang vaccine for chickenpox, itong varicella? Meron bang mga side effects na ito? Marami siyempre parents ang medyo hesitant when it comes to vaccines.
Very safe naman yung varicella vaccine. So although it is a live attenuated vaccine, it is safe to administer to your children. The usual adverse effect after injection or after the vaccine will be pain on the area of vaccination. There could also be tenderness or parang masakit, parang mabigat, and some would have fever. But relatively safe to children who wants to get vaccinated.
An itchy rash is the most common symptom of chickenpox, and the infection will be in your body for around 7 to 21 days before the rash and other symptoms may develop. Doctor says, what symptoms will you get around this period?
Just like any other viral infections, no, they would start with a prodrome of nonspecific flu-like symptoms. 1 to 2 days before the rash appears, patients may experience tiredness, loss of appetite, headache, or even fever. Now, this will be followed by the red spots, followed by a few hours by the blisters. Chickenpox would start on the chest and the back, and then it would rapidly spread all over the body, involving even the mucosal areas, no? Like, for example, our mouth, our eyelids, or even our genitalia. Now, the rashes are very itchy, and when you scratch them, there's a possibility that they can leave characteristic punch-out scars like pock marks that can be permanent.
1 or 2 days after you've experienced the rash will begin to develop, and the rash occurs in 3 stages. Dr. Candice, what's important to understand with these stages of this rash?
First of all, I would like to emphasize that even before the onset of the rash, they can be infective already, meaning they can infect others. So 48 hours before the appearance of the rash, this is the period of infectivity until after the rash have crusted or nag-dry up. For the rashes, usually they start as macule, so parang flat lang na red, and then rapidly becoming a papule, and then eventually becoming the characteristic vesicles or may tubig dun sa loob, and extremities in different stages.
Now, Dr. Candice, meron bang mga komplikasyon ang chickenpox sa bata? Are there other more serious complications that can occur with someone who has chickenpox?
Commonly will be bacterial infection, bacterial skin infection, meaning on the site of the lesions, they can have a bacterial infection on that site. Also, in yung more serious one will be encephalitis. So there are neurologic complications for children having varicella infection. Usually, it happens at the end of a week after the onset of the rash. And in children less than 15 years old, usually they may present with what we call acute cerebral ataxia, meaning there is loss of control of the muscles, but usually they will have full recovery. In older children, they can have diffuse encephalitis. Other complication will be pneumonia with fast breathing, difficulty of breathing, or dry cough. And other complications, they can have diarrhea, otitis media, and sore throat or pharyngitis.
Now, after you've had chickenpox, the virus remains dormant in nerve tissues near your spinal cord and your brain. And years later, the virus may reactivate as shingles. More on this when we return. We're your connection to healthcare. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk. Shingles can occur anywhere on your body, but it most often appears as a single stripe or blisters that follow a certain path that may wrap around your torso. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk. We're together in health. Now, the reason why we get shingles is, for the most part, unclear, but it may be due to some external factors, lowered immunity, some infections, or even age can be a factor. Doctor says, who are those most at risk of developing shingles?
Anyone who has had chickenpox can get shingles, no? And after you recover from the chickenpox, the virus moves only to the nerves inside your body where they become dormant. Now, there are many predisposing factors that would reactivate the varicella virus to form shingles. And usually you would see them, the most who are at risk would be the elderly, no? These are individuals in their 50s or those who are older. Now, other predisposing factors would, of course, be, let's say, for example, stress, trauma, and also patients whose immune system are weak are at high risk also of reactivation of the varicella virus to form shingles. This includes patients with cancer, those undergoing chemotherapy, those who suffer from AIDS, and even those people taking medications that suppress their immune function.
Now, a person with shingles can pass the virus to anyone who isn't immune to chickenpox. Doctor says, how does someone with shingles infect someone else?
Similarly, as chickenpox, the virus is spread through direct contact with the fluid from the blisters or through breathing in virus particles that get mixed in the air coming from the blisters. Again, just like chickenpox, once the rash has developed into crusting or scabs, the person is no longer contagious.
For Dr. Candice, if a parent develops shingles and they don't want to infect their child, what's your best advice for this? How can they be in the same household but still keep that level of safety?
For those children in the same household, we assume that if they are in the age group more than 1 year old, they should have been vaccinated with at least one dose of the varicella vaccine. If not, then the precautions at home will be the same for any virus infection. So they can wear masks, do hand washing, make sure that their clothes are separate from the others, and they don't mingle with other household members.
The signs and symptoms of shingles usually appear on a small section on one side of the body. Doctor says, can you go through some of the more common symptoms of someone who is developing shingles?
For shingles, unlike chickenpox, there is really, the prodrome is that you will experience some sort of pain, tingling sensation on the area where the rash would start, no? And then the blisters would appear, as you mentioned earlier, they are usually in a linear distribution around either the left or the right side of the body, following the distribution of the nerves, no? Now, in some individuals, like for those whose face would be affected, The eye can also be affected, and if it is left untreated, this can even lead to serious complications as far as loss of vision. But the blisters, similarly to chickenpox, would often also scab, and then the scab will spontaneously fall off after maybe about 1 to 2 weeks. So similarly, the lesions would have the same progression as that of chickenpox.
Aside from the trunk area or the chest, ang herpes zoster or shingles can also be seen in the eye. Can it be evident also in other parts of the body, like in the face area that you mentioned?
That's right. It actually follows the dermatobal distribution of the nerves. So anywhere in the body, you can have shingles. It can be on one half of the face, usually the upper half, including the eye area. It could be on one unilateral distribution on the extremities, like your one arm and then the leg. And it can also be on one area of the trunk, either the right or the left.
Once someone has shingles, since it's viral, should they think that this is something that is self-limiting? Should they take anything for it?
For most healthy individuals, the disease clears on its own without treatment. However, because of the risk of infecting other people, and developing complications like, let's say, for example, shingles, as I mentioned, postherpetic neuralgia, which can be very bothersome. So it is best to consult a doctor who can prescribe either oral or topical antivirals that could help hasten the recovery of the patient and prevent these complications.
Now, Dr. Candice, do we see shingles early on in a young adult's life or maybe a teenager who has had chickenpox earlier in their younger years? Is this common? If it is not common, why is this so kaya?
They can have shingles even at an early age, although it's more common on older age group. Usually it happens in those patients who are immunocompromised, so those are with high-risk population. In some, if they have not completed their 2 doses of vaccine, they can still have shingles or complications of the chickenpox. And this one, usually we see them in the adolescent age group.
Dr. Candice, for those who are still on the fence about giving the vaccine to their child, could you explain when this is usually given, what other vaccines are recommended at that age group when you give also the vaccine for varicella?
Varicella vaccine, the minimum age is 12 months or 1 year old. So 2 doses are recommended. The second dose, we usually give this at around 4 to 6 years old, but we can give it at an earlier age, and the minimum interval, meaning the interval from the first dose, will be 3 months. If ever that they are more than 30 years old already, then the interval between the 2 doses will be 1 month of age. These vaccines can be, varicella vaccine can be given simultaneously with other vaccines. If ever that they are not given simultaneously, the interval between 2 vaccines that are live vaccines will be 1 month, at least 1 month interval.
You can lessen your chances of getting shingles and avoid some of the symptoms. We'll talk about this and more when we return. Your health is our mission. This is MedTalk Health Talk. The best way to prevent chickenpox and shingles is to get vaccinated. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk, where your care always comes first. Treatment for chickenpox is mostly supportive, but there are things that you can do at home to ease the symptoms. Dr. Candice, please give us some tips. What to do when this happens, when someone has chickenpox. How can we prevent this?
For children, usually we do supportive measures. So since they will manifest with fever, we can give antipyretics, and those who are itchy or having pruritus, we can give them antihistamines, and we can also give anti-itch lotion. In these children, if there are other households who are exposed, we advise them to do safety precautions such as a hand washing, and also avoiding touching the other person or touching the contaminated items of that person. And also for children who have varicella, we advise them to drink lots of water, to take their vitamins, and also avoid going outside and possibly contaminating others as well. And very important, as we have emphasized before, to have your children vaccinated. So it's important that they complete the 2 doses so that they will be protected even at a younger age.
And Dr. Ces, do you have any advice for those who may be suffering from shingles? What should they do? And for those who have had chickenpox na medyo conscious with some of the scars that may have brought about, is there a way to minimize the scars?
The best way to prevent, as I mentioned, is to really avoid scratching the lesions, both for chickenpox and shingles when they are active. But just in case they do have the scars, we do have a lot of procedures that we can offer the patient. Most of the scars really can range from just discoloration. So we can give them some topical treatments to lighten discoloration. But the ones that are really harder to treat would be the ones, the pock marks, those atrophic scars. But we do have procedures like, for example, laser resurfacing, skin peeling that can really help with improving the appearance of these atrophic scars.
This discussion was indeed very helpful. Thank you, pediatric nephrologist Dr. Candice Brillante Corpus and dermatologist Dr. Cecilia Rojas Rosete. Shingles, for the most part, is self-limiting, but there's still a possibility of infecting others, as well as developing complications because of it, which is why it's important to get vaccinated. It will keep you healthy and safe from preventable infections. We want to be your partner for a lifetime of good health. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this has been MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. We'll see you again next time.